Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Frankel, and this is our class on learning literary analysis with the Hamilton musical. And in fact, the Hamilton musical has so much stuff in it. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who also played Hamilton, wrote so many clever lyrics that we can learn everything that goes in an ordinary English AP class, all the literary devices, all the poetry terms that English teachers want you to learn, and everything you'll need to be prepped for the English AP test. As it happens, I teach English 1B at college, which is roughly the same thing. If you pass English AP literature, you can skip, or rather the test, you can skip English 1B, and I certainly recommend doing so. The English AP language test gets you out of English 1A. So, yeah, let's take a look at so many fascinating, clever, deep writing bits in Hamilton and discover all the things we can learn about rhetorical devices here in the Hamilton text. Alrighty, accumulation. That's when you've got a pileup of terms, the same ideas over and over and over. Or even, it can be lots of different details, but that's the point, getting lots of different details dumped on you. I don't have a dollar to my name, an acre of land, a troop to command, a dollop of fame. Alliteration. Repeat sounds, and initial alliteration would be at the start of words, the venerated Virginian veteran, but you could have internal alliteration too. If Washington isn't gonna listen to disciplined dissidents, this is the difference, this kid is out. That was a lot of I that could be anywhere in the words, lots of D's and K's, and lots of S's, and it can appear absolutely anywhere, and they're all working together, linking the concepts, making them hang together better. You could have symmetrical alliteration in kind of an A-B-B-A pattern. Mad scrutiny, I scream in the face of mass mutiny. M-S-S-M. Ambiguity, a word that has multiple meanings or a phrase. Angelica, you've never been satisfied can have multiple meanings, as we'll discuss. Amplification, when you say something that explains something you previously said or adds more detail. Can I be real a second for just a millisecond? Anachronism. Anna without, chron, time, something that doesn't fit in the time in question. The army is in need of a shower, or the characters are debating using microphones and rapping. Sure. Anastrophe, reordering a sentence to add emphasis. If this is the end of me, at least I have a friend with me, weapon in my hand, a command, and my men with me. Analogy, a comparison. You're in worse shape than the national debt is in. Alrighty, aren't we funny? Anaphora, starting lots of things with the same phrase or word. I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. Or perhaps, you'll be back, you will see, you'll remember. Yeah. Anecdote, a cute little mini story that we pause this to tell. Burr talks about how Hamilton wrote so many essays for the Federalist Papers. Anticlimax, when you think you're going to have a giant climax, a really huge high point coming up, and instead it's just kind of flat. It's not that exciting. It just kind of happens. Yorktown feels like an anticlimax where instead of this giant battle, it's kind of a, okay, it's over. We're done with the war. Now what? Antistrophe. Repetition of a word or phrase at the end of things. Add structure. If this is the end of me, at least I have a friend with me, weapon in my hand, a command, and my men with me. You will notice I'm using a lot of the same phrases to make the same points, sure. Antithesis. Opposites side by side. These don't have to be working in the same phrase, that's something else, that's oxymoron, but just having opposites show up somewhat near each other. How can I keep leading when the men I'm leading keep retreating? Leading and retreating, of course, are opposites. And what effect does this have? It makes them seem more opposite. It makes the leading sound braver and the retreating sound more cowardly. And that's a thing that's worth thinking about for literary analysis. Step one is, I found a metaphor. I found antithesis. Good for me. All right. But step two is, the author is using antithesis to make leading sound braver and retreating sound more dismal. The author is using this to make a particular thing happen. Alliteration. If it's soft sounds, then it makes everything more peaceful. And if it's really hard, cluttery sounds, it makes everything sound more jarring. The authors use these effects to make things happen. With analogies and metaphors, what you're comparing it to puts a picture in people's heads. Whether you're comparing this to something nice or something horrible or something disgusting really makes a difference. Aphorism, a popular saying. Every action has its equal opposite reaction. Apostrophe. When people, often in Greek mythology or romantic poets, address something that isn't here, like Greek gods or nature, Ode to a Nightingale, something like that. Hamlet bursts out with, America, you great unfinished symphony. Obviously, really makes it seems like he's praying to America. Archaism, old-fashioned elements. Lots of your obedient servant, A.Ham, A.Burr. We get very formal. Lots of Aaron Burr, sir. Aside, a theater term. Obviously, since we're doing a musical, we will bring up some theater terms now and then. When a character says something quietly to himself or another character that everybody else isn't supposed to hear. In Hamilton, it's a lot of swear words. Assonance, repeat vowel sounds. Madison is grappling with the fact that. Asyndeton, sin, together, a without. Leaving out conjunctions makes everything seem faster and more scattered. Atmosphere, the kind of mood we're setting up here. Hamilton is setting up a really gross, overheated, messed up, problematic affair. Audience. Well, if you're writing an essay, the question is, who are you writing it for? What does this person already know about the topic? You don't want to give them too much background and bore them, okay. But we have an actual audience here in the theater, sure. And we've also got King George watching events, Angelica watching events. We've got the crowds that Hamilton gives his speeches to. We've got Congress listening to the rap battles. We've got a lot of audiences who all have to be pleased in various different ways. And our characters are very aware of who their audience is, of course. Beat, letting things just sink in for a moment. Changing the rhythm with an extra little space in there. Hang on, how many men died because Lee was inexperienced and ruinous? Okay, so we're doing this. You could really feel that pause there. Blank verse we'll be talking about later. Blank verse is when you go ba-bum, 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 but you don't actually rhyme. buzzword, slang that impresses, very trendy and fashionable right now. Uptown, everything's happening uptown. We should move uptown. And of course, the Constitution is the new hot thing. Cacophony, we discussed sound patterns. Well, if you've got harsh clattering sounds, lots of k-k-k-t-t-t, things sound painful, jarring, uncomfortable. God help me say no to this has a lot of really hard sounds in it. Sounds like we're going over a bumpy road. Cadence, how people talk, how they sound when they talk. And of course, we've got the author using lots of sound patterns to make the sounds better. Caesura, a break. This is a much smaller pause, more like a comma instead of that big, big half a sentence pause. Aaron Burr, sir. You can really hear that comma in there, that just little split, little pause. Chiasmus, when anything, words, sounds, ideas, whatever, go kind of A, B, B, A. And yes, you can have alliteration like this. Or you can have words or phrases. Are we a nation of states? What's the state of our nation? Of course, this also adds particular structure, makes things hang together better, shows parallels, makes it sound clever. Chorus. Well, if we mean the repeat verse of a song, King George likes that with his Oceans Rise, Empires Fall. If we're talking about Greek theater, the chorus is the townsfolk who watch everything happen and comment on it. And certainly we've got moments of that in here with the townsfolk backing up Burr or challenging Burr and asking him what he wants. Also, as everyone narrates and tells the story that's happening. Circumlocution, talking around something. Circum, around, log, to talk. Loc meaning place, really. When Burr and Hamilton meet, we really see Hamilton pausing, hesitating, not wanting to spit out exactly what he wants and exactly what his real question is. And when he asks Burr to help write the Federalist Papers, likewise, he's really hesitating and doing a lot of setup here. That's circumlocution. A cliche, an expression that's been used so much that it's not very interesting by now. If the shoe fits where it is not an original metaphor. Colloquialism, slang. We've got plenty of slang all over the place, of course, including dropped letters just to make rhymes work better, or things that really stand out like popping a squat. Conceit. When we compare two different things that don't fit very well, try not to crack under the stress. We're breaking down like fractions. Well, the first makes sense, but the second seems kind of strange next to it. Connotation. All the words suggested meanings. Satisfied has a sexual connotation, as well as the more standard getting what you want and having to do with ambition. Consonants. When you're using alliteration with lots of consonant sounds, it's a type of alliteration. So once again, the venerated Virginian veteran with those R's as well as the V's and N's. Contrast. Anything very different from each other. Peggy, Angelica, and Eliza have very different personalities as they walk around as a trio. Conventions. Well, there are a lot of rules to musical theater, a lot of rules to telling a story. And as we watch, we get to judge whether this person is sticking to the conventions in a way that we expect or breaking the rules in a way that surprises us. Starting with the main character's death is unusual. Starting by telling us everything that's going to happen is unusual, but they have both been seen in every story in other stories, so much that they're called a frame story, so we're not totally surprised by having a frame story and a prologue. The flashback of Satisfied is more unusual. Doing a flashback in theater is quite difficult, as we got to see with this show, but we understand the concept of a flashback, even if it's more common to television, movies, and books, so we get it, we can follow, we're on board. Counterpoint duet. This is a term from musicals, not literary analysis, but so many of my students were asking what this was that I definitely wanted to throw it in here. This is when two people are singing two different songs at the same time, but occasionally they match up in interesting ways. We Don't Talk About Bruno would be a great example, also by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And during the process of this course, we will take a look at Encanto and other Miranda stories. Sure, why not? All right, so Farmer Refuted has a lot of that going on, as several of their words, like revolution, meet up at the right times. And yes, it's clever, it's delightful. We, the fans, love it when this sort of thing happens. Couplet, two lines that go together and rhyme. Sure. Oceans rise, empires fall, we have seen each other through it all. Yeah. Denotation. Well, if connotation is all the shadings and suggested meanings, then denotation is literal, just the dictionary meaning. Diacope. Kind of an ABA pattern of repetition. You'll blow us all away. Someday, yeah, you'll blow us all away. Yeah, of course, would be a colloquialism, slang. Dialect. Language that comes from a particular region or era. We're using dialect from George Washington's time, of course, but we're also using modern rap and street phrasing and current slang and mixing them together. So we've got at least two dialect patterns, quite likely more. Dialogue. Two speakings, log is to speak, or having to do with words. Two people are speaking to each other. Okay, Hamilton and Burr pair off a lot. Diction, speech patterns, and word choice. We're using diction, as we said, from two different times. Dialect tends to be more about a very specific time or place, whereas diction could have to do with a professor's diction or a very particular person's diction or a sloppy person's diction or child's diction. There are lots of things that can cause diction. But the mixed diction somehow works here. Didactic, having to do with teaching. Burr does a lot of teaching. Those who run their mouths off wind up dead. Talk less, smile more. Yeah, he's got lots of teaching stuff. Double entendre, double meaning that probably is sexual. I heard your mother say, come again. Alrighty. Double meaning sounds less sexual, just there could be multiple meanings here. This should be fun, could be sarcastic, or could be eager and serious. And when the words are cleverly written, one can give a suggestion of both at once. Ellipsis, leaving out words. 3 dots is also called an ellipsis and frequently used to leave words out. Now my life gets better every letter that you write me. Eliza sings and leaves out the word with. We're dealing with a lot of songs in Hamilton, obviously. I'm treating them like poetry, where we can analyze so many things about the word choice and the line structure and so on. Well, in poetry, you've got end-stopped lines, where the end of a line of poetry, or in this case, song, goes with a period or comma and the end of the thought and is roughly the same as a sentence. And that's one choice, but it's not required. Laughing at my sister because she wants to form a harem. I'm just saying if you really loved me, you would share him. That sounds like two sentences. And they're even each divided very neatly in half with a comma. Very regular. Okay. Enjambment is the opposite, and that's where you keep your line going you keep your sentence going for more than one line instead of stopping at the end. And every day while slaves were being slaughtered and carted away across the waves, well, clearly after carted, the sentence keeps going, even though carted is the end of the line, which is being used to rhyme with. So that's enjambment. Ensemble. Well, of course, we've got this crowd here that is acting like a crowd, acting like the citizenry, acting like the soldiers, acting like Congress. Sure. And in fact, as they get more energetic and gather in bigger numbers, this emphasizes that Hamilton's ideas are spreading. Epigraph. If you've read a novel that starts with a cute little quote at the beginning, usually from another book meant to suggest there's a similarity or a shared theme, that's an epigraph. Jefferson starts his first cabinet battle by proclaiming life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Alrighty. Epiphany, an aha experience, a sudden realization about something. Angelica meets Hamilton and realizes she really wants a smart husband, but this is succeeded by the realization that this isn't exactly what her plans are for her life, and she's going to have to compromise. Hamilton also gets some revelations, especially the idea to write the Reynolds pamphlet. Of course, that doesn't work out for him. Epistrophe. Repeating the same word at the end of things. You're an orphan. Of course, I'm an orphan. Shows parallels, knits this all together. Epitaph. Similar to eulogy. Saying something nice about a deceased person. An epitaph is more specifically a piece of writing about this dead person, like a poem. And the whole show works as an epitaph for Hamilton's death, as does that final song. Of course, a lot of these are coming from old epics like the Odyssey and Greek mythology and places like that. If we're calling Athena Gray-Eyed Athena or the Gray-Eyed or anything like that, if we're giving her a nickname, that is known as an epithet. Well, we've got the $10 founding father, we've got Mr. Age of Enlightenment, we've got a number of epithets here. Eponym. Naming something after its creator. Mr. Burnsides created the sideburns, apparently. Sam Adams references the beer that Sam Adams invented. Euphemism. Says something nice instead of saying exactly what you really mean. I would like to powder my nose instead of I need to, well, even use the bathroom is also a euphemism. We get the idea. Well, I'll show you where my shoe fits. Is a little vague on exactly what he's going to do to what body part, so I guess that's a euphemism. Whereas euphony, nice in euphemism and euphony, phone, sound, is soft, calming sounds. The song Let It Go got cut, but in it, Eliza and Washington are in fact encouraging Hamilton to let it go, using all kinds of soft sounds. Let it slide, listen to your wife. It was all with the L's and the S's do sound very soothing. By the way, all the cut songs are on YouTube and highly recommended. They're part of the Hamilton Adventure. Also the beloved Hamiltome, the book Hamilton the Revolution, which comments on how Miranda came to write this and what he was thinking and places like that and so forth, also has the text of the cut songs. They pretty much use the music we've heard other places. If you use the same metaphor over and over and over, you've got an extended metaphor. We've got a lot of chess going on in this. Lots of logic, lots of thinking carefully, lots of measuring your opponent. We've got feminist rhetoric. Rhetoric is speeches, the art of speaking well, and Angelica is a little skeptical of Jefferson making his Declaration of Independence without any women's rights in it. Figurative language is using all this stuff: metaphor, simile, hyperbole, euphemism, any of it. My sun outshines the sun. That's nice. That's a metaphor. Also an exaggeration, sure. Free verse, if we're not using rhyme and rhythm and traditional patterns. Hamilton's death speech really fits that better than other things. Homonyms. Homo, same, nym, name. Words that have the same spelling and the same pronunciation, but different meanings. Don't change the subject, because you're my favorite subject. Same spelling, same pronunciation, different meanings. Homophone. Same sound. Words that sound the same, but are spelled differently. I never spent a cent that wasn't mine. You sent the dogs after my scent. That's fine. Cent and cent. 2 and 2. There and there. Sure. The third one, by the way, is homograph, which is same writing, which is spelled the same but pronounced differently, like the dove dove. Alrighty. We've got a hook, a compelling thing that makes us curious at the start. Burr tells us he shot Hamilton. Lots of people want to stay for a few hours to find out how that happened. Hyperbaton. Not using normal word order. Shaking things up to call attention to it. I hope Hamilton is in a prosperous enough position to put wealth in the pockets of people like me down on their luck. Makes the man sound like he's trying to sound elegant, but is really just trying too hard and is awkward with his word use. Hyperbole. Big exaggeration. I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Yikes. More traditional exaggeration is just, I'll make a million mistakes, or my sun outshines the sun, or something like that. New parents are allowed to use hyperbole. Idiom. An expression that doesn't make much literal sense, but we've been saying it that way for a very long time. If the shoe fits, wear it. Meaning, if this comment I'm making applies to you, then you should accept that. Is unusual. Well, doesn't make sense now, but it's actually a very common expression. Imagery. Imagery paints a picture in our head using descriptive language. Our man saw his future dripping down the drain. It doesn't have to be a visual image. It could be an image with sound or smell or anything like that. This one sounds like sound. Incongruity, things that don't match well together. Actually, our two different time periods match pretty well in this one. I mean, fit together pretty well. Intertextuality, when one text is influencing another. Hamilton starts talking a lot about Macbeth, and then in fact he comes to resemble Macbeth as the choices he's making bring about his downfall. And of course, we've also got other texts here, like the Declaration of Independence, the Reynolds pamphlet. We've got a lot of texts in this story, a lot of real speeches. We'll be talking about that more later, how the minute we're reading books in a book, or going to the theater, in a play, we're making all kinds of comments about how interesting words are and what effect words have on people. And we're reminding the audience that they're watching fiction. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic and something I really enjoy, called metafiction. Irony, the last thing we expect. Or a twist, and there are several kinds. Dramatic irony occurs when one character knows something the audience doesn't, or the audience knows something a character doesn't, or one character knows something another character is unaware of, any of those. Sure. Burr is not convinced the Federalist Papers and the Constitution are going to work out. We, the audience, are fully aware that they're going to work out, and Burr is missing his big chance in history by not grabbing onto this. During the whole American Revolution, as Hamilton and Washington are getting very, very worried about how things are going, we, the audience, know that they're going to win. Sure, we've got a lot of awareness that the people up there would love to have. Situational irony, the last thing we expect happens. Hamilton tells Burr, you really need to take action. You really need to seize the day. And Burr finally does and defeats Hamilton's father-in-law for a Senate seat. And that's really awkward. Verbal irony, like sarcasm, saying something you don't mean. Yeah, I can't take a break. I'm too busy. And then he has his affair. Isocolon. Parallel structure, as in it's the same setup between sentences or between phrases. And in this one, they're similar in grammatical structure, but to be isocolon, not just parallelism, we would need the same length. So talk less, smile more, with those one-syllable words really sets up the same structure. Makes it feel tighter, makes it feel cleverer, makes it feel really just smart and well thought out. Jargon, technical language, like the stuff used by a computer programmer or a doctor or something. Well, Jefferson uses financial jargon to talk about how he's centralizing national credit and making American credit competitive. Okay, then. Juxtaposition, unexpected things side by side. How does a ragtag volunteer army in need of a shower defeat a global superpower? Those are some weird opposites to have side by side. I know we have some phrases that sound like they're covering the same territory, and yeah, that's the nature of thousands of years of rhetorical devices and literary analysis. We get more than one expression for something. Of course, doing your analysis, you can use whatever makes you happiest. Leitmotif, back to musicals. If somebody's got a little theme tune that goes with a particular set of words or a particular idea, like Lord of the Rings has the music of Hobbiton, which it plays at sentimental times, not just when they're in Hobbiton. Well, Angelica, Eliza, the Schuyler sisters, each come with their own little bit of music to go with that word, and that is a leitmotif. If we are being literal about what we mean and what we're promising, I'll make the world safe and sound for you. Malapropism. Yes, I know there's a Mrs. Malaprop in children's fiction. Malapropism, Shakespeare likes this one. It's when a character keeps using the wrong words, probably because they're not as smart as they think they are. He uses it a lot to show that people are, from the poor class and just trying to sound all fancy. We don't have so much of that going on in this one, but Lafayette's stumbling the pronunciation of anarchy kind of fits both the concept and the intended effect that it has. A maxim is quite often somebody's personal goal, personal catchphrase, personal plan on how they want to do things, and also a common expression. In New York, you can be a new man, which of course has lots of other things going on like repetition and parallelism, sure. Metaphor, if you compare yourself to something, I'm a diamond in the rough. A dead metaphor is something that we've heard so often that we don't really get a picture in our heads because we're just used to it. Your pants look hot? Yeah, we're so used to that looks hot that we don't really think of it with a mental picture. We just go, yeah, that makes sense. Well, actually, I suppose a diamond in the rough would also be something of a cliche and thus a dead metaphor. Lots of fun using phrases. An implied metaphor is when you don't directly say what it is, you just use words to suggest it. He floated, not he is a cloud. I'm drowning in your eyes is an implied metaphor. Your eyes are pools is a direct metaphor. A mixed metaphor is when you use part of one and part of another, which is usually confusing and awkward unless it's meant to be funny or something. I'm down for the count, boxing metaphor, and I'm drowning in your eyes. Those are different, Eliza. Maybe your head and heart are just so swept away that you're not keeping an eye on your phrasing. Metonymy. When one thing is substituted for another similar thing. Hamilton asked for my father's blessing. Well, no, he asked for permission to marry her, but blessing is used to substitute for that. Likewise, the throne or the crown instead of the kingdom. Misdirection, when we were being led one way and then we're surprised to have something else happen. Oh my gosh, Hercules Mulligan has saved the day. We hadn't heard from him in a while. That's surprising. Mood, how the audience feels about what's going on. This is different from tone, which is how the writer wants us to feel. Well, they could be different anyway. Onomatopoeia, a sound word that means what it sounds like buzz or hum. We've got pop, chicka pop, and bra, all kinds of actually shooting sounds from rap that are traditional conventions from there. Oxymoron, a phrase made up of contradictory elements, like a deafening silence, or a merciful slave master. Paradox, statement that is contradictory yet still works. There's suffering too terrible to name, but she's still kind of naming it. Okay. Parallel structure or parallelism or parallel construction are when things are laid out the same way. Same kind of grammar, the same parts of speech, the same basic length. Talk less, smile more would be an obvious one, but there are plenty of others. Parataxis, simple short ideas. Back to talk less, smile more. Parentheses, of course, we can put less important information in those round bracket things, although he says in parentheses is a bit more direct than we normally get. Suppose that would be reciting stage directions. Personification, a metaphor where you treat something as if it's human. History paints me in all my mistakes. History is getting human qualities. Likewise, if the flowers dance or the dog talks to me, anything like that, we're doing personification. Death will come for me. That too. Polysyndeton, extra connections. Many connections. Adding extra ands makes things seem slower and more orderly. Guns and ships, and so the balance shifts. And there we've also got beats, so it's really slowed down, huh? Pun, play on words. My shot has a bunch of meanings, from alcohol to guns to my chance, and they're all these meanings are bouncing off each other here. Quatrain, 4 lines that go together, sure. Redundancy. Saying the same thing twice, not really needed, not even that artistic. Lafayette, you're a hard rock. Okay. Repetition. This can have a number of effects. It can emphasize a point. It can tie a speech together. It can make somebody feel like they're being carried off in a different direction. especially if you go forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Makes it feel like this is going to take forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Reversal. Eliza tells Hamilton, "I'm not afraid, I know who I married." And then later he says it back to her, showing how paralleled they are, showing how things have come full circle, showing their connection, showing that he's become more like she is. All very nice, even in sad times. Rhetoric is all of this, the art of arguing, the art of making pretty speeches. So a rhetorical question is not a real question, it's put in to be artistic. We get plenty of them from Burr, who wants to know how and why Hamilton is succeeding. And we get several from Hamilton, too. And we've got the chorus asking everybody what they want and what they're planning to do. Sure. It wakes up the audience. Any interesting devices do that. And it has the audience kind of mentally answering these questions. Sarcasm, saying the opposite of what you mean with a mocking tone. "Aw, such a rough life. Better run home to your wife." From the cut song, The Adams Administration. Semantics, word meanings and shadings that change what's being argued. Well, sure, I was trustworthy. I didn't steal. I just had an affair. And that does not fly with the public, does it? Setting, where and when this whole thing is taking place. As we know, they keep telling us the exact year, and we're in New York. And at the same time, we've got some anachronisms, don't we? Sibilance. Sounds like it. Specifically alliteration that uses lots of S's and soft sounds. Specifically S sounds. Your sentences border on senseless. So that's consonants and alliteration and sibilance, which are all various degrees of specific to make this point. Which is something else you get a lot of in rhetorical devices. Simile, comparison using like or as, hard rock like Lancelot. Of course, I reused lots of these terms, as you've seen. Soliloquy or monologue. One person gives a big speech, and traditionally in theater, other characters can't hear them, and it's like they're thinking to themselves. Well, in a musical, songs tend to have that effect, and we see so many characters doing these soliloquy style songs where they're sharing their really personal thoughts with just the audience. And of course, we've also got Hamilton's spoken death scene. Spectacle, all kinds of just amazing stage effects. We've got some like the turntable. Stanza, a few lines that go together, like a paragraph or a chorus or a verse, but for poetry. Style. When you can just tell it's a Lin-Manuel Miranda musical because of the word choice, because of the themes, because of the preferences of certain character types, certain situations, any kind of pattern where you can just watch and go, oh, well, that's a Lin-Manuel Miranda show, or that's a Mel Brooks movie, or whatever it is. I can just recognize it by how the writer writes, how they sound, and what they're trying to do here. Sure. And any of these elements can come together to be style, of course. Subtext, hidden meanings. Apparently, in some performances, Angelica and Lorenz exchange a glance suggesting that they really both care about Hamilton and are kind of saying goodbye to him as he gets married. Suspension of disbelief. Well, if we read fantasy and it says that flying griffins show up or that elves can do magic, we just kind of shrug and go, okay, fine, it's a fantasy novel, I can accept that. Well, in this thing, we've got founding fathers played by actors of color. We've got them, using microphones and slang and so forth, and we just go with it, because that's how storytelling works. Synecdoche, a part represents the whole. Metonymy, a slightly different thing, represents the whole, but synecdoche, a part, represents the whole, like the hand meaning the whole person. There's nothing your mind can't do. She means there's nothing you, all of you, can't do. Synesthesia, a metaphor where you're using the wrong sense to describe something. Also a real medical condition, which is similar to that where you hear colors. Follow the scent of his enterprise. Well, his enterprise doesn't have a smell, so that's a metaphor. And particularly synesthesia. A lot of things here are types of metaphors. Syntax, word order. This is where it gets me, on my feet, the enemy ahead of me. Word order can be used for all kinds of reasons, from emphasis to showing what kind of a person this is or where they're from. As I said, tone is what the creator has put in the show to make how the creator wants us to feel. And we've got some very perky songs next to some very sad songs. Transitions, then, next, however, those help tie things together, and in telling a story, really help us work out what effect things are happening, what order they go in, and so forth. I know it's been a lot of literary devices. We are approaching the end. And what do you do with these? Well, logically, you would put them together to make some kind of a point, probably in an essay. Like Angelica uses lots of rhetorical devices to show how clever she is. That's my thesis. And then I'm going to use a lot of these as examples. Or Burr's contrast between his text and his subtext, what he says he wants and what he's thinking, really show how conflicted he is. Something like that is your essay, and then you find lots of proof in the text to support yourself and explain what effect all of these rhetorical devices are happening. Alrighty, a few more. Tricolon, things in sets of 3. Acre of land, a troop to command, a dollop of fame. Lots of 3s are always common in things, especially fairy tales. Tropes, a common device, a common moment of story. Hamilton has an affair and his wife throws him out. That's recognizable. That happens in lots of stories. Being young, scrappy, and hungry and trying to make it big in the big scary city. That's another one. Understatement. We talked about overstatement, hyperbole. In fact, Burr tells Hamilton in the gentlemanly phrasing that was really common at the time. He requests, and all right, this was cut lyrics, an immediate acknowledgement or disavowal. Well, acknowledgement would mean, meet me at dawn, guns drawn, and we're going to shoot each other. But in gentlemanly phrasing, he says other things like, give me an acknowledgement or name a time and place. Euphemisms. Euphemisms and understatement can be related. Utterance. When you say something that could really be meant about yourself, kind of a Freudian slip. As Burr keeps complaining about Hamilton's successes, he really seems to be talking about himself. Voice. How the narrator is telling the story. Burr's voice is irritated, frustrated at Hamilton's success. And our last one, zeugma. When a word has 2 different meanings and they both work. My Eliza's expecting me, not only that, my Eliza's expecting. As we've discussed, Miranda has so many clever phrases. He's got so much going on in his text. It's quite wonderful. And that gives us so many literary devices to find as we keep going through rhyme and rhythm and sound patterns and bigger elements like plot and character and so many aspects of what's going on in this musical. We can discover so much and do a whole English class into the process. So while you're watching Hamilton and considering all these elements, You should also try considering these elements in other books, in movies, in musicals, in whatever you like, TV, because they're everywhere. All right, you're going to find them more in denser, cleverer texts, but you can try some poetry or, yes, even some musicals and see which ones of these you can find and what effect they're having. I also find that reading the lyrics slower can really help you notice a lot more. The lyrics to Hamilton are at genius.com, and lots of other lyrics are online nowadays as well. So, yeah, take a look and see how much you can discover as we keep going. Got a bunch of lessons left. Thanks for sticking with us. Off we go.